Welcome in, everybody. Let's get right into it. Okay, I think my love for the ideas of space exploration could be easily noted in half of my episodes. But to me, what is surprisingly left unexplored are our own oceans. The surface of our planet is more than 70% water. There are depths and fathoms where sunlight cannot touch. The sunlight literally dilutes so much through millions of gallons of water that it can't break through to most of the ocean. That's stinking crazy. I mean, there are what's called sunlight zones where the sun can illuminate into the ocean, but it ends at a specific point, and it's just darkness. It's just pitch black below that. And I think it ends about 200 meters below the surface. And this is where the pressure from the ocean water is so intense, and it's so phenomenal that nothing can venture down into it. Nothing can go that far unless it wants to get crushed. We saw that with the billionaire submarine a few months back. But, what else are you going to get when you pilot a submarine with a Xbox One controller? Now, to put a bow on the point of how much we haven't ventured into exploring our own oceans, it is often claimed that we know more about the surface of Mars than we know about our own ocean floor. That's pretty wild. So let's kind of begin our journey into wondering about the darkest depths. What might be down there? I think I might have to start where water came from exactly. Now, there's no definitive, concrete scientific explanation for where exactly water came from. But let's go back to the formation of the planet. Now, we know how planets get formed, right? Very much like stars do. So back when the Earth was still dust and it was tons and tons of gases that were kind of revolving around each other, and then they drew in all of these asteroids and rocks and dust, and it starts to compact, right? And the gases superheat and they melt the rock together, and that forms this tiny sun, this molten core, and that tiny molten core gets gravity, right? It develops a gravitational pull. So it pulls in all these surrounding asteroids and rocks and everything that got thrown out into space whenever the sun exploded and formed, right, from its supernova, from its birth. It threw out all of these gases and dust particles and rocks and everything, and a lot of that collided into one another, and it formed planets. And that's how our planet got formed, in a very basic way. Now, the breakdown of water is, everybody knows it, H2O. 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. And that makes a water molecule. Now, these are both gases, right? That they come together through a chemical change to make a liquid molecule. And since stars, planets, and moons form with the combining of these solids and gases, it is more than likely that some of those gases that composed the Earth whenever it was formed were hydrogen and oxygen. In fact, it's almost a certainty. So right there, we have our jump on where water comes from, in large part due to the planet's formation. That's not to say that it formed water. I mean, it was just a ball of molten slag for a good long while. There'd be no chance for something like water to even exist. But the gas components for it were present. Now, there's also another theory that has this massive comet, or an asteroid of sorts, crash into the planet's atmosphere, carrying massive amounts of either the components necessary to form water, or just straight up carrying water itself. And this theory happens to lend a hand to a few others that are a lot more wild and fun. One of my favorites is that the comet is where we get the ancestors of things like squids and octopus, real freaky things that live in the depths that become the stuff of legend, right? Like the Leviathan or the Kraken, or even one of the princes of hell, Dagon, who is said to be this vast and evil sea creature. He also sounds a little bit like Cthulhu to me, how he's described in biblical lore. It's kind of fitting to me, too, that both a staple of Lovecraftian mythos and a prince of hell would reside down in a realm that can't even be seen, where sunlight itself cannot reach. It's got all of this pressure weighing down and crushing anything that ventures too deep, and it's colder than the coldest cold imaginable. It's definitely sounding like a version of hell to me. It's also strange that, like I said, the molten core of the planet is as hot as the surface of the sun, yet the closest that we could get to it without digging any holes or without anything in our way, so you kind of move the water out of the way, it's at the bottom of the ocean, right? Now, the icy nature of those watery depths is easily explained, but the best thing a predator does is hide in plain sight, right? So it's really weird to me that the closer you get to something as hot as the surface of the sun, the colder and darker an environment you find yourself in. It's almost as if there's, maybe not the planet, but there's a force, a will of cold, dark, malevolent evil trying to prevent you from getting to that molten, warmthy goodness. And, I mean, those predators, they're faster and stronger than whatever their prey is, especially if they're living down under all this pressure, right? I mean, could you survive a miles-long kraken-like squid? Could anything? So, yeah, those comet and asteroid theories, I think there might be a little something there. I think it may have just brought in some of the single-celled organisms or bacteria, some kind of building block of life that was necessary to create things like that. I mean, things like Leviathan and Kraken and Dagon, they sound mythical, they sound fanciful, but I mean, dinosaurs were real. And what little we actually know about dinosaurs, these things were massive, mostly reptilian. They if we saw one today, they would clearly be monsters. They would obviously be something out of a movie or a novel, right? They would murder everybody relentlessly. So, just going off the pure fact that dinosaurs are real, I think it's entirely possible that something, at least fitting the description of a leviathan or a kraken, could be entirely real. Continuing with the comet idea, it's also thought that comet was responsible for delivering the ancestor of what would eventually evolve into human life. If not more than that. I mean, I could absolutely see comets bringing in things like jellyfish, because those are really stinking weird. But again, if it didn't bring the exact organisms that would eventually evolve into human life, I think it may have at least brought the components. And that same theory says that whatever struck the molten ball that was the Earth at the time, it was so large that the rest of it broke off, and the gravity of the planet crushed the remnants, and that became the moon. And that's how we got our moon. We do know how moons form, just like we know how planets and stars are made. So that's an entirely possible explanation as well. So, our oceans. Why don't we dive deeper? We have an idea of how they formed, of where they came from, the impact that they've had on our planet. We have some good ideas about all that. Now, from what I can find, the main reasons, in a nutshell, that we haven't explored more of our oceans is that basically it would be way too expensive, and the zero visibility due to the immense lack of sunlight. Actually, no sunlight once you're that far down. And the immense cold temperatures also are a huge impediment. As a matter of fact, something that I did find interesting was I found this one article describing just how dark the depths of the oceans were when they're at that point. You could throw on some floodlights and you wouldn't be able to see a thing. Because the further down that you go into the ocean, the more stagnant the water. The water doesn't move as much, right? So you have a whole bunch of bacterias and microorganisms that are getting in your way by the trillions, right? And that's one reason that stagnant water is so dangerous, and you shouldn't drink from it because it builds up bacteria and microbes and things like that can be harmful. So it's almost useless, it's almost pointless to try and illuminate that part of the ocean. We really wouldn't be able to unless the oceans got smaller and sunlight could penetrate even more of the water. It would take a almost act of divinity to allow us access to that part of the ocean. And there's also the matter of our lungs being able to only handle 1 atmosphere's worth of pressure. That is how we evolved. Once you get down there, in that part of the ocean, there's a whole 2nd atmosphere's worth crushing down on you. And we would end up imploding. So it's very safe to say that there are impossibilities in abundance, right? Though I'm fairly convinced that with enough motivation and technological innovation behind the science, we could definitely figure out a method of exploration. Maybe not human exploration, maybe not divers, but robots, or maybe we develop some sort of nanobot, something that we could send down there. I really think it is imperative, if we really want to make some concrete discoveries and conclusions about not just our own evolution and history, but the evolution and history of the planet and all of its inhabitants. And, maybe all the crazy shit gets proved in the end. Right? Lost city of Atlantis, the Lovecraft city of R'lyeh, or however you say it. Maybe we find some psychic creatures that are sending us signals, right, through metric tons of pressure away to a select few people that drive them into madness. And the only thing that's keeping these psychic creatures from driving us all mad is because they're sending them through an entire atmosphere of pressure. So maybe the water isn't as malevolent. Maybe it's there to protect us. But because water is clear, then it's like looking into the depths of hell without being able to touch it, which drives human beings insane, right? Knowing that something is there, but not being able to venture forth and experience it, right? And with that in mind, what could possibly be living down there in those kinds of conditions in the first place, under all of that pressure? And could it be possible that those creatures would not be able to live above that level of pressure, just like we cannot live down below it? I mean, that fits the description of a monster, if you ask me. And it's just sitting there, biding its time till the world sunders and collapses in on itself. Of course, with help from human beings in some form or fashion. And it's very fitting. All across the world for some 2,000 years now, probably longer, almost every culture has developed some kind of connection between the ocean and evil mythical creatures like the sirens or Jormungandr, the Japanese Umibozu. It's this large shadowy demon that rises up out of the tides. There's the Ningan, which is a human whale-shaped creature that lives in the deep, deep oceans. So, with most, if not all, major areas of world culture, let's say, with all of these places having their own form of fearsome sea monsters, I think it's safe to say that something may be down there. I mean, with most of the ocean still unexplored, I think the scary thing is that it's more likely than not that there are some sort of sea monsters. There is Godzilla. He's just too buried down in there, I mean, if we really do want to discover all there is to know about our planet, we are eventually going to have to fight whatever eldritch horror awaits us in the darkest, coldest depths. And who knows, maybe we could discover some new element, a previously unknown kind of metal, or some kind of composite that we could slap on a spaceship, and that helps us with our space exploration endeavors. And hey, maybe we could even figure out how to perform cold fusion far more efficient than what we currently know. And that can get us into space. My whole aim is to get us into space. I mean, if we can learn more about ourselves and the history of the planet, I'm all for that too. That is 1,000% on my list of things that humanity must accomplish. And I think we could make some frightening headway if, humanity wasn't as stupid as it is, constantly at war with itself and putting its worst foot forward on countless fronts. There's never not the most evil and depraved things that humanity has created going on, right? There's never not war or slavery or it kind of really it does all break down to war or slavery, if you think about it, because I mean, take any situation and that basically boils it down to what's happening in some form or fashion. So if we could maybe not end those things, but if we could minimize them down to where they have a non-net positive effect on the human populace, and it allows humanity to work together, truly work together, then I think we could make a new golden age for humanity, for the planet, and God knows it's sorely needed. But yeah, that is all I had time for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and stick around for more Sci-Fi Unchained. But for now, live long and prosper, my friends, and may the Force be with us all.